The satellite image showed exactly what everyone feared. General Marcus Holbrook, the highest-ranking U.S. military officer captured in 30 years, being marched through the gates of Kala Dhurga Prison. The facility was built into the side of a mountain in northern Pakistan, designed by Soviet engineers in the 1980s, as a place where people disappeared and never came back. Triple perimeter walls, guard towers every 50 meters, motion sensors, thermal cameras, and over 200 armed fighters who knew that holding an American general was worth more than gold. The Pentagon briefing room was silent as the final image appeared on screen. Holbrook in an orange jumpsuit, hands bound, being shoved into a reinforced cell in the prison's maximum security wing. He'd been captured 72 hours ago when his convoy was ambushed during a classified inspection tour near the Afghan-Pakistan border. 5 soldiers killed, the general taken alive. And now he was inside a fortress that had never been successfully penetrated. Extraction options? The Secretary of Defense asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Colonel Sarah Chen from Special Operations Command stood. A conventional assault would require at least 200 operators, air support, and would result in catastrophic casualties on both sides. The prison is designed to withstand exactly that kind of attack. By the time we fought through the perimeter, they'd have executed the general and collapsed the mountain on top of him. Recovery time for planning and staging, minimum 4 days. We don't have 4 days, the secretary said quietly. Intelligence suggests they're planning to move him within 48 hours. Once he's relocated, we'll never find him. And the information he carries. He didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room knew that General Holbrook had access to classified operational details that could compromise American forces across 3 continents. That's when Captain Amelia Brooks spoke up from the back of the room. "I can get him out." Every head turned. Amelia was 34 years old, 5 feet 8, with auburn hair pulled back in a tight regulation bun and green eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. For the past 8 years, she'd been part of a classified unit that conducted operations. Conventional forces couldn't. Solo infiltrations, high-risk extractions, missions in denied areas where American presence had to remain completely deniable. "Captain Brooks," Chen said carefully, "we appreciate your SOAR expertise, but this isn't a standard infiltration. This is a maximum security military prison with 200 armed guards." "Which is exactly why a large-scale assault won't work," Amelia replied, stepping forward to study the prison layout on screen. "But one person, with the right skills and the right timing, can get inside, locate the general, and extract before anyone realizes what's happening." The secretary studied her for a long moment. "Captain, your service record is impressive, but what you're suggesting is suicide. Even if you somehow got inside, the facility is designed so there's no way out except through the main gate." "Then I'll go through the main gate," Amelia said simply. Her tone wasn't arrogant. It was the calm certainty of someone who'd done impossible things before and was prepared to do them again. 6 hours later, Amelia was on a C-130 transport aircraft heading toward a remote airstrip in eastern Afghanistan. She'd spent the intervening time studying every piece of intelligence on Kala Dhurga Prison, memorizing guard rotations, identifying structural weaknesses, and planning an operation that had approximately a 20% chance of success. Most people would have been terrified by those odds. Amelia had operated under worse. The infiltration plan was insane by any reasonable standard. Amelia would parachute into mountainous terrain 15 kilometers from the prison, trek through hostile territory alone, breach a facility designed to be impenetrable, locate the general in a complex that held over 300 prisoners, extract him through 200 armed guards, and escape across the Pakistan-Afghanistan border before response forces could cut them off. The fact that she'd volunteered for this mission said everything about who Amelia Brooks was. The jump happened at 0200 hours from 25,000 feet, a halo insertion that put her on the ground 8 kilometers from the nearest known hostile position. She buried her parachute, cached her jump gear, and began the approach march with nothing but the equipment she could carry. Suppressed Sig Sauer pistol, combat knife, breaching tools, climbing equipment, communications gear, and a small backpack containing items that would be critical for the extraction. The trek took 6 hours through terrain that would kill most people, narrow mountain trails, loose scree slopes, and ravines that required technical climbing skills. Amelia moved like a ghost through the landscape, using night vision when necessary, but mostly relying on enhanced situational awareness that came from years of operating alone in the world's most dangerous places. By 0800 hours, she was in an observation position 2 kilometers from Kala Dhurga Prison, watching through a spotting scope as guards changed shifts and morning activities began. The facility was exactly as described, a concrete fortress built into the mountainside, with the main structure partially underground and only one road leading in and out. But Amelia wasn't planning to use the road. She'd identified something during her intelligence review that everyone else had missed, a drainage system that carried wastewater from the prison down the mountain. The pipes were too small for normal infiltration, and they were protected by steel grates and sensors. But Amelia wasn't normal, and she'd brought specialized equipment designed for exactly this kind of problem. At 1400 hours, when guard alertness was lowest during the heat of the day, Amelia moved to the drainage outlet at the base of the mountain. The pipe was 3 feet in diameter, covered by a heavy steel grate anchored in concrete. She pulled out a specialized cutting tool, thermite paste that could burn through steel while producing minimal smoke and noise. It took 40 minutes to cut through the grate. Every minute felt like an hour, knowing that a patrol could appear at any moment or a sensor could detect her presence. But Amelia's hands were steady, her breathing controlled, working with the precision of someone who'd learned that in her profession, patience was more valuable than speed. The grate fell away, and Amelia slipped into the drainage pipe. It was tight, barely enough room to low-crawl through the darkness with her pack ahead of her. The pipe angled upward into the mountain, following the natural slope of the terrain. Water trickled past her, carrying the smell of sewage and waste. It was claustrophobic, dark, and would have broken most people's nerve. Amelia just kept moving forward. 300 meters into the mountain, she reached a junction where the drainage system connected to the prison's main infrastructure. This was the critical moment. She was now inside the prison's security perimeter, but still in the utility spaces that existed beneath the actual facility. She pulled out a small tablet showing the prison's architectural plans and began navigating through the subterranean maze of pipes, conduits, and maintenance tunnels. The first guard she encountered was a maintenance worker checking a junction box in a utility corridor. He never saw Amelia coming. She moved from the shadows behind him, a precisely applied chokehold rendering him unconscious in seconds. She zip-tied his hands and feet, gagged him, and dragged him into a recessed alcove where he wouldn't be found for hours. His uniform was too large for her, but Amelia had anticipated this. She'd brought items to adjust the fit, a belt, safety pins, creative folding. It wouldn't pass close inspection, but from a distance she'd look like another prison guard moving through the facility. The transformation took 5 minutes. When she emerged from the utility corridor, Amelia was no longer an American Special Operations officer. She was Khalid, a guard whose name tag she'd taken from the unconscious man, moving through the prison with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. The prison was a maze of corridors and checkpoints, but Amelia had memorized the layout. She knew that General Holbrook was being held in Cell Block D, the maximum security wing reserved for the highest value prisoners. Getting there required passing through 3 checkpoints, 2 of which involved biometric scanners that would identify her as an intruder. That's where the real infiltration began. At Checkpoint Alpha, Amelia approached with a maintenance work order she'd forged during her preparation. The guard barely looked at it, just waved her through while arguing with another guard about a soccer match. First barrier cleared. Checkpoint Bravo was more complicated. It had a retinal scanner that Amelia couldn't bypass. Instead, she waited until a guard shift change created momentary chaos, then slipped through in the confusion of bodies moving in opposite directions. It was a technique that required perfect timing and the ability to read human behavior patterns, skills Amelia had spent years perfecting. But Checkpoint Charlie, the entrance to Cell Block D, was different. This was the maximum security transition point, with armed guards, full body scanners, and protocols designed to catch exactly the kind of infiltration Amelia was attempting. She couldn't talk her way through. She couldn't slip past in confusion. She needed a distraction. Amelia had prepared for this. She pulled out a small device from her pack, a remotely activated smoke grenade hidden in what looked like a maintenance equipment box. She'd placed it earlier while moving through the facility, positioning it near the prison's main power distribution center. She triggered the device. 3 seconds later, alarms erupted throughout the facility as smoke began pouring from the electrical room. Emergency protocols kicked in. Guards rushed toward the perceived threat, convinced they were dealing with a fire or electrical sabotage. In the chaos, Checkpoint Charlie's security focus shifted from screening people to managing the crisis. Amelia walked through in the confusion, just another guard responding to the emergency, and suddenly she was inside cell block D. The maximum security wing was exactly what she'd expected. A concrete tomb where light barely penetrated and hope died slowly. Steel doors lined both sides of a central corridor, each one marking a cell designed to break the human spirit. The air smelled of despair, unwashed bodies, and the unique stench of fear that permeated places where people were forgotten. Finding General Holbrook's cell took precious minutes that Amelia didn't have. The facility was still dealing with the smoke grenade crisis, but soon someone would realize it was a diversion. She moved quickly but carefully, checking the small windows in each door, looking for the face she'd memorized from intelligence photos. Cell 47. D. General Marcus Holbrook sat on a concrete bench, his hands still bound, face showing the evidence of interrogation, but eyes alert and focused. When he saw a guard's face appear in his cell window, he tensed, then froze when Amelia spoke in perfect English with an American accent. General Holbrook, Captain Amelia Brooks, U.S. Special Operations. I'm here to extract you. We have approximately 4 minutes before this facility goes into full lockdown. Do exactly what I say, and we'll both get out alive. Holbrook's eyes widened in disbelief. They sent one person? Are you insane? Probably, Amelia replied, already working on the cell door's lock with specialized picking tools. But I'm also your only chance of leaving this place. Now, are you injured? Can you move quickly? I can move, Holbrook confirmed, his military training taking over despite the shock. What's the extraction plan? The same way I came in, Amelia said as the lock clicked open. Through routes they don't think anyone can use. She handed him a guard uniform she'd stolen from the unconscious maintenance worker. Put this on. Fast. We're about to walk out of here like we own the place. Holbrook changed with impressive speed for someone who'd been imprisoned for 3 days. Amelia adjusted his uniform, trying to make him look less like a recently captured prisoner and more like a guard who'd had a long shift. It wouldn't fool anyone who looked closely, but they weren't going to give anyone that chance. One more thing, Amelia said, pulling out a small syringe. This is going to hurt, but I need you to trust me. Before Holbrook could ask what she meant, Amelia jabbed the needle into her own arm and drew blood. Then she smeared it on Holbrook's face and uniform, creating the appearance of fresh injuries. If anyone sees us, you're a guard who got hurt in the electrical fire. I'm escorting you to medical. Limp slightly. Look dazed. Can you do that? I spent 3 days being interrogated, Holbrook replied grimly. Dazed won't be difficult. They exited the cell just as alarms began sounding throughout the prison, not the fire alarms from Amelia's smoke grenade, but security alarms indicating an escape attempt had been detected. Someone had found the unconscious maintenance worker or noticed irregularities on the security cameras. They know, Holbrook said tensely. Doesn't matter, Amelia replied, her voice still calm. We're already ghosts. Stay close and move with purpose. The moment we look like we're running, we're dead. They moved through cell block D toward the checkpoint, Amelia supporting Holbrook, who was playing his role perfectly, limping, holding his ribs, looking like a guard who'd been injured in the crisis. Other guards rushed past them, responding to the escape alarm, barely sparing them a glance. Checkpoint Charlie was in chaos. The smoke grenade crisis had combined with the escape alarm to create exactly the kind of confusion Amelia had been counting on. Guards were shouting conflicting orders, some trying to seal the facility while others were attempting to respond to multiple emergencies simultaneously. Amelia and Holbrook walked through the checkpoint in the middle of the chaos, just two more people in uniform moving through a crisis that had overwhelmed standard protocols. But as they reached the corridor leading toward the maintenance levels where Amelia had entered, a voice called out behind them in Pashto, "You two! Stop!" Amelia turned slowly, supporting Holbrook. A senior guard was approaching, his face showing suspicion that was rapidly turning into certainty that something was wrong. "This man needs medical attention," Amelia said in Pashto, maintaining her role. "The electrical fire—" "I know all the guards in this facility," the senior guard interrupted, his hand moving toward his weapon. "And I don't know either of you." Time seemed to slow. Amelia calculated distances, angles, options. The corridor was too crowded for a gunfight. Innocent prisoners would die, and even if she killed this guard, the alarm would bring dozens more. She needed a different solution. "You're right," she said, her voice dropping the Pashto accent and returning to English. "You don't know us, because we're already gone." Her hand moved to a pouch on her belt and pulled out 2 flashbang grenades, the kind designed for close-quarters combat that created blinding light and deafening sound without lethal fragmentation. She threw them down the corridor in opposite directions and tackled Holbrook to the ground, covering both their ears. The world exploded in white light and thunderous sound. Amelia was up immediately, pulling Holbrook to his feet and running. No more pretense, no more careful walking. They sprinted down the maintenance corridor toward the utility levels, alarms screaming behind them, guards recovering from the flashbangs and raising weapons. Bullets sparked off concrete walls as Amelia and Holbrook dove through a doorway into the maintenance tunnels. They were no longer infiltrators trying to avoid detection. They were fugitives in a full sprint for their lives. "This is your extraction plan," Holbrook shouted as they ran through the dark tunnels, Amelia's flashlight cutting through the darkness ahead of them. "Still better than dying in that cell," Amelia shot back, her navigation skills working overtime to remember the route through the maze of passages. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit were growing. Guards had entered the tunnels, and they knew these passages better than Amelia did. She led Holbrook through 3 junction points, making turns that seemed random, but were actually following the route she'd memorized. They splashed through standing water, ducked under low pipes, and squeezed through spaces barely large enough for human bodies. Then, they reached the drainage pipe, the 3-foot diameter tunnel that led out of the mountain. "You're kidding," Holbrook said, looking at the pipe's narrow opening. "It's this, or go back and ask nicely if they'll let us leave," Amelia replied, already climbing into the pipe. "Your choice, General, but make it fast." Holbrook climbed in behind her, and they began the claustrophobic crawl through absolute darkness. Behind them, flashlights appeared at the pipe's entrance. Guards had found their escape route. "They're coming," Holbrook warned. "They're too big to fit easily," Amelia replied, still crawling forward with practiced efficiency. "We'll be out before they can catch us." What she didn't mention was that she'd prepared a surprise for anyone who tried to follow. 50 meters into the pipe, she'd placed a small explosive charge during her infiltration, not enough to collapse the tunnel, but enough to make pursuing her extremely unpleasant. She triggered the charge remotely. The explosion behind them was muffled by the pipe, but still powerful enough to shake the walls. The concussion wave and smoke would temporarily seal the pipe, buying them the minutes they needed to reach the exit. They emerged from the drainage outlet 300 meters down the mountain just as the sun was beginning to set. Amelia immediately grabbed the pack she'd cached nearby and pulled out weapons, a rifle and pistol for each of them. "Hey, now we run," she said simply. The escape across hostile territory was a nightmare of endurance and tactical movement. Amelia led them through ravines and over ridgelines, avoiding roads and known patrol routes, moving with the kind of sustained intensity that would have broken ordinary people. General Holbrook, despite 3 days of captivity and interrogation, kept pace with impressive determination. He was 56 years old, but had maintained the physical conditioning of a much younger man, and his combat experience from decades of service meant he understood how to move through hostile terrain. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of pursuit, vehicles on distant roads, helicopter rotors in the valleys below. The prison had mobilized every resource to recapture the escaped general. But Amelia was leading them through terrain where vehicles couldn't follow and where their small profile made helicopter detection difficult. After 8 kilometers of brutal movement through mountains, Amelia called a halt in a defensive position with good visibility. She pulled out her satellite communicator and sent a coded signal. Package secure. Request extraction at Rally Point Bravo. The response came 60 seconds later. Extraction inbound. ETA 30 minutes. Hold position. 30 minutes, Holbrook said, checking the rifle Amelia had given him. They'll find us in 30 minutes. Then we make them regret it, Amelia replied, setting up a defensive position with overlapping fields of fire. She'd brought magazines for both rifles, not enough for a sustained battle, but enough to make any assault costly. The first enemy patrol appeared 22 minutes into their wait, 12 fighters moving up the ravine in tactical formation, clearly trained soldiers rather than random militia. They knew the terrain and were moving with confidence that suggested they had intelligence on Amelia and Holbrook's location. Amelia let them get close, 200 meters, then 150, then 100. Holbrook started to shift nervously, but she put a hand on his arm. Wait. At 75 meters, the enemy patrol was in the perfect kill zone. Amelia's first shot dropped the lead scout before he even knew he was being engaged. Her second and third shots took down the 2 fighters immediately behind him. Holbrook opened fire simultaneously, his military training evident in controlled, precise shots that found targets with professional efficiency. The enemy patrol scattered, seeking cover and returning fire, but they'd been caught in the open in a ravine with limited cover options, and they were facing 2 shooters in elevated positions with superior fields of fire. The firefight lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, the enemy patrol was either dead or retreating, and Amelia had expended half her ammunition. More importantly, she could hear the distinctive sound she'd been waiting for, helicopter rotors approaching from the south. "That's ours," she told Holbrook, pulling out a signal mirror to mark their position for the extraction helicopter. 2 minutes. The CH-47 Chinook came in fast and low, its door gunners already firing suppressive bursts at distant enemy positions. It touched down just long enough for Amelia and Holbrook to sprint aboard, then immediately lifted off, gaining altitude and speed while taking sporadic small arms fire from the surrounding hills. As the Pakistani border fell away behind them and the helicopter crossed into Afghan airspace, General Holbrook finally allowed himself to believe he was safe. He looked at Amelia, who was calmly reloading her weapons as if she'd just completed a routine training exercise rather than one of the most audacious rescue operations in military history. "Captain Brooks," he said, his voice carrying a weight that came from spending 3 days convinced he would die in that prison. "I need to know something. Why did you volunteer for this mission? They could have sent a team or waited for better options. Why risk your life coming alone?" Amelia finished reloading her pistol before answering. "Because, sir, someone needed to go and I knew I could do it. That's what we do. We go into impossible situations because someone has to, and we have the skills that give us a chance of succeeding. The fact that it's dangerous doesn't change the mission requirement." "Still," Holbrook pressed, "one person against an entire prison fortress?" "The odds were better than if we'd sent a large force," Amelia interrupted gently. 100 operators would have triggered every alarm and defense the prison had. One person could slip through the gaps in their security, exploit human factors they weren't expecting, and be gone before they mobilized an effective response. Sometimes the smallest force is the most effective force. Holbrook studied her for a long moment. "How many operations like this have you conducted?" "That's classified, sir." "How many people know what you do?" "Very few." "And you're comfortable with that?" "Operating alone, taking risks most people would consider suicidal, doing work that will never be publicly acknowledged." Amelia smiled slightly. "Sir, I didn't join this profession for public acknowledgement. I joined because I'm good at it, because the missions matter, and because someone needs to be willing to go into the dark places and do the difficult things. The fact that no one knows is irrelevant. The fact that it worked is what matters." The debriefing at Bagram Airfield took 6 hours. Intelligence officers wanted every detail of Kala Dhurga Prison's layout, security procedures, guard patterns, and structural weaknesses. Amelia provided a comprehensive after-action report that would be used to update intelligence files and inform future operations. General Holbrook provided his own debrief about his capture and captivity, including details about his interrogation that confirmed worst-case scenarios about what the enemy had been trying to extract. The fact that Amelia had gotten him out before he broke, and every prisoner eventually breaks given enough time, had potentially saved operations across multiple theaters. When the official debriefings were complete, Amelia expected to be dismissed back to her unit. Instead, she was summoned to a secure conference room where General Holbrook was waiting along with several senior officers she recognized from the Pentagon. "Captain Brooks," Holbrook began, "I've spent the past 6 hours reading your service record. Or rather, the version of it that I have clearance to access. It's impressive and also deeply concerning." Amelia remained silent, her expression neutral. "You've conducted 47 solo operations in denied areas over the past 8 years, Holbrook continued. 47 times you've gone alone into hostile territory to conduct missions that were deemed too risky for conventional forces. Your success rate is 100%, 0 mission failures, 0 compromises. And somehow, you've survived situations that statistically should have killed you at least a dozen times." "I'm good at not dying, sir," Amelia said simply. "That's exactly my concern," Holbrook replied. "You're so good at surviving impossible situations that we keep sending you into them. At some point, the odds will catch up. At some point, even your skills won't be enough. Are you ordering me to stop accepting these missions, sir?" "No," Holbrook said quietly, "because we both know that would be irresponsible. Your capabilities are too valuable, and there will always be missions that require exactly what you can do. But I am telling you that what you did yesterday, infiltrating that prison alone, extracting me through 200 armed guards and escaping across hostile territory, that was extraordinary even by your standards, and it concerns me that you make the extraordinary look routine." One of the other officers spoke up. "Captain, we're recommending you for the Medal of Honor for the Kala Dhurga operation." "It won't be approved, sir," Amelia replied immediately. "The operation is too classified. Acknowledging it publicly would compromise sources and methods we can't afford to reveal." "You're probably right," the officer admitted, "but the recommendation will be in your file. When these operations are eventually declassified, maybe in 20 or 30 years, people will know what you did. With respect, sir, I don't do this for recognition 30 years from now. I do it because the missions need to be done." After the meeting, as Amelia was preparing to return to her unit, General Holbrook pulled her aside one final time. "Captain, I know you believe that operating alone is your strength. And you're right. It is. But I want you to remember something. The reason you're so effective isn't just because you have exceptional skills. It's because you understand something that most people never learn. You understand that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's accepting the fear, calculating the odds, and doing what needs to be done anyway. That's rare. That's valuable. And that's why, when the next impossible mission comes along, they're going to call you again." "I know, sir." "And you'll volunteer?" "Yes, sir." "Because someone has to." "Exactly, sir." Holbrook extended his hand. "Then I hope, Captain Brooks, that when you're on your next mission in some God-forsaken place behind enemy lines, you remember that there are people like me who owe you our lives, and we'll do everything in our power to make sure you make it home." They shook hands, a general who'd spent 3 days in hell and a captain who'd walked into that hell alone to bring him out. 6 weeks later, Amelia was back at her unit's classified facility, reviewing intelligence on a chemical weapons facility in Syria that needed to be infiltrated and disabled. Initial assessments suggested it would require a special operations team of at least 20 operators with extensive support assets. Amelia studied the layout for 3 hours, then walked into her commander's office. "Sir, I can do this alone." Her commander sighed, looked at the impossibly dangerous mission profile, looked at Amelia's absolutely serious expression, and thought about the general she'd extracted from a maximum security prison by herself. "Tell me your plan," he said, "because that's what you did with Amelia Brooks. You listened to her impossibly audacious plan, tried to find holes in it, realized she'd already thought of solutions to problems you hadn't even identified yet, and then you authorized the mission, because you knew that when she said she could do it alone, she meant it. They didn't know she went alone behind enemy lines. They didn't know she infiltrated a maximum security prison that was supposed to be impenetrable. They didn't know she extracted a kidnapped general through 200 armed guards and escaped across hostile territory with half the enemy military looking for her. But General Marcus Holbrook knew. The intelligence officers who debriefed her knew. The helicopter crew that had extracted them under fire knew. And the 47 other operations she'd completed alone, each one impossible, each one successful. Those were known by the handful of people with sufficient clearance to understand what Amelia Brooks really did for her country. She was the person they sent when conventional forces couldn't succeed. When the mission was too sensitive for a large team, when failure meant not just mission compromise, but international incidents or loss of life that could change the course of operations worldwide, she went alone into places where being caught meant torture and execution. She faced odds that should have killed her. She succeeded when success seemed impossible. And she did it without fanfare, without recognition, without anyone beyond a classified few even knowing her name. Because that's what the best operators do. They don't seek glory. They seek mission success. They understand that some work happens in shadows, that some victories are never celebrated, and that the truest form of service is doing the impossible things while the world remains blissfully unaware of how close it came to catastrophe. Amelia Brooks was one of those operators, the kind who went alone behind enemy lines, the kind who rescued generals from maximum security prisons, the kind who made the impossible look routine and the extraordinary look effortless, the kind who would do it again tomorrow if the mission required it, because someone had to. And she was very, very good at being that someone. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage.